Hello, hello, my brothers and sisters. This is Garrett Bake, your brother in arms, and welcome to another episode of Awaken the Guardian. Today we have a special guest. Again, I love these special guests. And you guys can't see it yet. You will when you see the video version. But she is in full uniform. Captain. See, I'm always screwing this up. Captain. Yes, Captain. Captain Marcy Cox with the Arizona Department of Public Safety. She is the guest on the show today. So we're going to talk about something that most of us as police officers avoid like the plague. I'm not going to give you that topic yet because, well, odds are you probably shut it off. So I'm going to warm you up a little bit by giving you her story. I'm going to move this a little bit because we can't see your face.
Okay.
There we go. That's a little better. Perfect. Okay, so how long have you been with the Department of Public Safety, DPS?
Just over 20 years.
20
In December, it will be 21 years since I started the academy.
So I've had this conversation with quite a few of these cops that I brought on, but how was it that you got involved in law enforcement? Because first of all, not a lot of people do, and second of all, you're female. So how did this happen for you?
For me, it was a very natural transition. So I was raised by a single dad, and he had worked in law enforcement in Southern California. So he kept his uniforms in my closet. And so when he would come home and, change out or whatever, his stuff was in my closet, and I was the little girl in the corner, peering up, waking up every single day. And then I have all brothers. So between real brothers and stepbrothers that I actually was raised with, I've got 8 total, and I'm the only girl, and I'm right in the middle. So transition into police work for me was a very, very easy transition.
So how old were you when you started down this path?
Getting into law enforcement,
Yes.
I was 23.
23. So were you living in California at the time, Arizona? Like because you said you grew up in Southern California, right? How did you end up in Arizona?
Arizona State. I came out to go to college.
Devils.
Yeah. So
Love
just came out for college and never left. Followed my big brother, actually. He went to Arizona State.
Did he? Okay. So your dad was in law enforcement. Did you have any other family members that were in law enforcement?
None.
None. Okay, just your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And how many years did your dad serve?
To be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. He worked a bunch of years and then stayed on as a reserve a bunch of years, and then ran a 7-Eleven store for years, which was always hilarious because every cop in town came and had their coffee there. And so that was just kind of a normal part of my upbringing. But as far as exactly how many years, I couldn't tell you. I don't know.
So, but it seems like it was the majority of his adult life.
Right.
Very cool. So you come to Arizona, you go to Arizona State, and at what point, so you're going to college, what were you studying?
English, actually. So that story's kind of funny. I had always wanted to get into law enforcement. My mom was adamantly against it. And so when I graduated high school, I was 17, I was young. And when I went to my high school counselor, when I was a junior, I was 15, 16 years old. And I said, this is what I want to get into law enforcement. I want to be an FBI agent. And so Silence of the Lambs was big then. And so I was a big fan, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be FBI. But FBI then had a height and weight minimum and maximum for females, and you had to be 5'9". And I was not 5'9". And, I was, like I said, 15, 16 at the time, and who knew whether I was going to actually make it that height. So I was convinced to go to college, and I didn't know what I wanted to go for because law enforcement was all I ever wanted. And I was like, well, I'm good at English, so I'll do that because I didn't really know what else to do. And then by the time I finished, DPS had a big 1-page ad in the Arizona Daily Star, and I saw it. Actually, a friend brought it to me, and I went and applied and was hired 3 months later.
Wow. So just within 3 months, your life shifted.
Totally changed.
So what was the academy like for you? I mean, were you the only female recruit, or were there all the recruits?
There were actually a lot of females in my class. I think we had 10 to 12 total, whole bunch. So now at the academy, we run a DPS only class. But when I went, and for many years, they were mixed classes. So we had quite a few with Phoenix, one with Glendale, lots of different females from all over the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so how was this transition from watching your dad put on the uniform every day to now you're putting the uniform on every day? Like, what was this like for you?
it's not something you put a lot of thought into, right? You kind of just do it. And I didn't have my dad's. There's a whole personal side to my story where I have my dad's police jacket, and it's something that I've held on to always. In fact, actually, the cuffs I carry are his too. So every so often, something will come to the surface where I'll have an interaction with one of those, or I'm conscious about the fact that they're my dad's cuffs based on something that's happened, that I'm arresting, or something that I'm dealing with that is significant, and you recognize your own personal safety, where you become very aware of what we do and how important it is. Where those things, come to the surface, and then you feel this overwhelm of gratefulness and pride, that I've followed in my dad's footsteps.
Right.
So
that's something that's amazing and very special. I mean, if you think about the amount of police officers who follow in a parent's footsteps, it's not really as high as you would think it is. So the fact that you were able to do that is an amazing thing. So you start with DPS. Where are you stationed first?
First duty station was Yuma, Arizona.
Yuma, Arizona. For those of you who don't know where Yuma, Arizona is, it's on the border with California and the border with Mexico.
Yes.
So you've got a lot of interesting activity that happens down there. How big is the city? Would you say about 100,000 maybe?
It probably is now. It was smaller then. Yeah.
So you're talking under 100,000, a lot of farm fields, and a lot of traffic, we'll call it, coming up from Mexico.
Yep.
Both human and drugs. So what was that like for you? You start down there, they throw you in your own car, and they say, good luck.
It was fun. I loved working in Yuma. Yuma was a great place to start my career. You described it very well. There was just an abundance of activity. It's very easy to stay busy if you wanted to. And I happened to work on the State Route 95 highway, which goes from Mexico north to Quartzsite. So yeah, there were lots of, opportunities to get drugs and human trafficking and get in pursuits.
I want you guys to hear the way that she's phrasing this. This is what we do as cops when we talk to people who are cops. There was a lot of opportunities for me to be involved in the cool shit, like the cool shit that we like to do as cops. Like, let's be honest. We like being in chases. We like getting the bad guy. We like getting the drugs.
We do.
So you had a lot of experiences doing this.
A lot. Yeah.
So I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second. What is your most memorable experience from your time in Yuma? Or one of? Sounds like a few.
Yeah, I have a few. Probably my most memorable. The gang squad for DPS at the time was interested in having me over, join their team. I'd been on for about a year, and so they were doing this big gang roundup and a bunch of going and picking up people with warrants, and had a couple search warrants, and so they invited me to come be part of this detail. My chain of command signed off on it. And actually, it just so happened to be that the father of my girls, my ex-husband, we were dating at the time. He came and did a ride along as well. He was stationed up in Quartzsite at the time. So there's one guy driving the car, Chuck Ordonez, who was an amazing partner of mine for years. He worked for Yuma Police Department, assigned to get him. And I'm in the passenger seat, and my now ex-husband that I was dating at the time is in the back seat. And so we do this big gang briefing. There's probably 100 cops there, and getting the lowdown on what we're supposed to be doing. And we hop in the car, and we're the first to peel out of the parking lot. And as soon as we peel out of the parking lot, Chuck recognizes this car in front of us as somebody they've been looking for a while, right? And so we get behind this car and end up in a pursuit, and we're driving all over town. And pretty soon he opens the door, and he's like, he's going to bail out. He goes, "You're running." And I'm like, okay, here we go. So he bails out of the car while the car is still moving. They stay and deal with the car. I chase after the guy. And obviously I was able to catch him, or the story wouldn't be that exciting. But I was able to catch him a couple yards away, backyards away, not yards away. And here comes my ex-husband, boyfriend at the time, running up after I had caught him, and I'm holding on to the guy and holding him down to the ground. He comes rolling up with my radio, all of my gear that had fallen off of. No. So they dressed me up for this detail. I wasn't in my normal uniform, right. And half the stuff that they gave me didn't fit and wasn't secured right. And so he's literally running behind me collecting all of my items and comes rolling up with a handful of items. And we laughed about that for years. So it was a good time. And I made it on the squad right after that. So
that is a good time. That is a good time. Yeah, that's no worse feeling than realizing in the middle of something that the tools that you're used to having with you are not available.
Right. Right.
But at least he was nice enough to pick them up.
He was.
So you
Good
spent
man.
how many years in Yuma?
About 3 years.
3 years, and then you said you got assigned to GITM. And for those of you who don't know GITM, she could probably tell you the acronym, but it's the DPS, or Department of Public Safety Gang Task Force. So they work statewide with local agencies.
It's a task force. Yep.
So what does GITM stand for? I forgot.
Well, at the time, it was just Gang Intelligence Team Enforcement Mission, but now they added the immigration piece. It's got 2 I's in it, but it wasn't back then.
All right.
Yeah.
So there you go. So you're part of this group, this task force, and are you still assigned in Yuma, or did they transfer you somewhere else?
So I was transferred to the Cochise County Squad after that.
That's down in southern Arizona.
Yep.
Okay. So how long did you work down there?
I was down there for probably another 3-4 years.
Okay. So you're spending most of your time in southern Arizona, and again, dealing with a lot of the issues that come up from the other side of the border, which kept you pretty busy.
Yes.
So what's the next step in your career?
Next step was also in GITM, working undercover. I was still living down in Cochise County, but driving up to Tucson every day, working undercover with the team up there.
Okay. So Tucson is a city, over 1 million people. So bigger city, bigger problems. Those that work in a bigger city know about this. So you're working now as an undercover detective. What is that like for you?
It was fun. I actually really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. When I came back to a uniform assignment, it gave me a very different perspective. Obviously, when you befriend the bad guy. But I also found it very easy, and I don't know if that's just because I'm a girl, that maybe we have it a little easier than some of the guys do. You tend to be questioned less because there are fewer of us. So it made it really fun because I was busy all the time.
Oh,
yeah.
So let me ask you, I'm going to kind of interject your personal life here. So
sure.
We didn't talk about it at the beginning, but obviously you weren't married when you first started.
Right.
You had a boyfriend who was also at DPS when you were in Yuma.
Yep.
So I'm guessing things got more serious.
We got married, have 2 girls.
Okay, so at this point you're working undercover.
Right.
In Tucson. And you now have a family.
Got a couple babies, a couple toddlers.
Girls?
Little toddlers,
girls.
yeah.
So what's this like, having to separate being a mom to 2 little girls and then being a female undercover police officer playing this game of I'm a bad guy, but really I'm not?
Well, my perspective now is very different than it was then. My perspective then was, the job kind of came first, and it was normal, and that's all my kids have ever known is 2 parents that work in law enforcement, and they're used to the call outs and long hours and the job coming first. So my perspective obviously now is different. My kids are older, so yeah. But at the time, I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it.
So I want you guys to listen to what she's saying. It doesn't matter if you're a male or a female in this profession. By nature, this profession separates you from your family. Like, it just does. And so if you're not conscious about it, and you're hearing Marcy talk about this, that she wasn't conscious of what was going on at this time. Like, it just became normal. Like, when did normal become 16 to 18-hour days? Or, hey, I haven't seen my mom for 3 days, or my dad for a week. Like, when did this become normal? And so we teach our kids that this is part of normal behavior. And so who ends up raising the kids? I don't know, a babysitter, TV,
right.
Social media. This happens to us. And listen, because you're a police officer, see, I'm going to take this back. We talk about situational awareness and this being so important in our job, like literally keeps us safe. But we go home and they tell us to shut it off, and we literally shut it off. And so we ignore all the things that are in front of us. So on the surface, you're one of the very few female undercover detectives. Like, I know this. I worked undercover for years. We had 1, and she only did it part-time. So you're one of the few that's doing this, and it's really, for those of you who've never had this experience, like, it's so unique, and it's so rewarding at the same time. Because, like she was saying, you are infiltrating the bad guys, like playing this game with them. And it's really cool.
It is really cool.
You get to buy drugs or guns or cars or whatever, and then just walk away and you're like, I just did that.
Yeah.
It's cool, right?
Right.
So professionally, you're starting to, I don't think climb is the accurate word, but you're starting to gain some notoriety. People are starting to see who you are. Man, she's a hard worker. Look at all the things that she's done.
And that fueled me. It fed me big time.
And it fed you. So your ego now is starting to get involved. But how, looking back, of course, how was this affecting your personal life?
Oh, it was not good. Obviously pulled away from my husband, the girl's dad now. And he's a cop, so he is. But it was funny because looking back now, I saw myself as different than him. And so I don't want this to come across as demeaning, because he's one of my closest confidants and friends today. We're very close, and I'm very fortunate to have that with him. He's a sergeant with DPS now. But at the time, he had only worked in patrol his whole career. And then I'm this kind of anomaly at DPS and was doing all these other things, not patrol. And I was getting a lot of attention for it. And it unfortunately fed me the wrong way and not a good way. So I saw myself as different than him.
Right. And listen to this. There's a lot of you out there who are these dual cop families. And either one way or the other, it's going to affect you differently than those of you who aren't, right? Because our ego is involved in our job. Naturally it is, right? It's what keeps us alive. It's what keeps us safe. But then we take that ego home, and now we start to see the differences. And so, again, talking about my experience, my wife wasn't a cop, but I would go home and I would expect certain things, because here I was, this really cool cop, right? I was working SWAT and gangs, and I was doing undercover. I was doing all these cool things. So why didn't you think I was so cool?
Yeah. So he still is a very balanced individual. He's one of those people that has always had it right and always put family first. And I didn't understand that, because that wasn't really how I was raised. And it certainly wasn't what I became after that ego was fed. So
you're going down this path, and things are starting to get a little rocky at home. So what was your natural reaction? So you're having some conflict at home, because I'll let you kind of explain it, but it sounds like he wanted more of you, the mother.
Yes.
And that wasn't showing up. So
yes.
How is it that you're starting to deal with these confrontations that are happening?
I didn't. I just didn't. We didn't talk about it. He would bring it up to me. You know, he would get frustrated when I would work long days or frequently missing dinner with family and things like that. I always volunteered to work all the holidays. I was always the first one to raise her hand, and I'll be there for every detail. And
wow. Are you guys listening to this? Does this sound familiar?
Where he was always the first one to say, I'll stay home with the girls. And so we both pulled away from each other.
Right. So what happens here, and I want you to hear this, is we talk about sedation a lot. And a lot of you think that sedation is like alcohol or drugs or something like that. We, as cops, sedate with work all the damn time. Like all the time. Like I remember doing this. I remember working 36-hour shifts and then getting home and just wanting to go to sleep, obviously because I was tired. But it worked for me because I didn't have to deal with my issues at home. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to deal with the fact that I'd missed another birthday party. I didn't want to deal with the fact that my wife wanted me to go to church and I didn't want to. Like I didn't have to deal with this stuff. I could just go back to work. So how long did these issues like kind of simmer before they came to a head?
Gosh, probably a couple years.
And so they finally come to a head. And are you still working undercover at the time?
I think so, actually. Yeah.
Okay. So it ends up coming to a head. Again, two very proud cops, neither of which I'm assuming wants to admit any wrongdoing,
mm-hmm.
which is
both very stubborn. Yep.
Very typical of us. So what ends up
happening? What kind of became the big catalyst for me is actually the second part of the segment, if you want me to get into that.
Ooh, I don't yet.
Okay.
This is kind
so
of
that was a big turning point.
We will talk about the catalyst.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? Screw it. Let's talk about the catalyst.
Okay.
Now. It's your story, and we can't hide it anymore. All right. So a couple of years, things come to a head, and what is the catalyst then that drives what happens?
So I'm at home. I had just gotten home working a late shift, and I was changing out. It's dark. Everybody in my family is asleep, and the phone rings. And of course, this was before cell phones, so I assume I'm getting called out to work. Answer the phone, and it actually was dispatch patching another dispatch through to my home phone, and the message that was being delivered was that my dad had committed suicide. It was on Father's Day.
So Father's Day of what year?
Let's see, 13 years ago.
2005.
2005.
So Father's Day 2005, you're thinking, I'm going to get called out, and instead you get the patch through from another agency notifying you that your father has died, and not just that he's died, but that he committed suicide.
Correct.
How did this affect you?
In ways I can't even describe. It still does. My dad, I always idolized my dad, obviously, my entire life. I followed in his footsteps. My dad was a put the job first, balls to the wall, adrenaline junkie, and I wanted to be exactly like him. I think the day that he pinned my badge on was probably the proudest day of his life, as it was for me to be able to have him do that. So, kind of the message that I took away from what happened that night, without going into all of the personal details, was he was getting the last word, which my dad was famous for. He was incredibly stubborn and very set in his ways. And he wanted to get the last word, and he got the last word. And a lot of people paid the price for him having to get the last word with the choice that he made, obviously. So, it forced me to literally reevaluate everything, the importance of family, the importance of time that you can't get back, the importance of balance, not getting the last word, not being stubborn, all of the things that I'd thought were what would make me successful and kind of had been from a professional standpoint only until then. But I realized that that wasn't the life that I wanted.
So I want you guys to hear this. Like, she didn't grow up with a life that was any different than yours, right?
Correct.
You can say single family, you can say two parent, you can say no parent, it doesn't matter. What we are naturally is a product of our environment, right? And so in her environment, she had a father who was a police officer, and she wanted to be just like dad. And the truth is, you became just like your father.
I did.
In more ways than one.
Yes.
Like, not just a police officer. You were stubborn, you were hard-headed, and you put the job first.
Yep.
And so here you are in your personal life. It's starting to crack. There's some struggles. And this huge blow comes that your father, so stubborn and set in his ways, said, okay, well, I'm going to do it my way.
Right.
Because I'm so stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how did this shift your life at that point?
Everything kind of crumbled after that. Obviously it took me some time to get to make the realizations and to process them the right way to get to where I am now. Obviously it took a lot of years, but there were other things that happened with my agency that made me sort of turn my back on everybody.
Right.
During the time that this occurred, when I actually got the phone call that night, I got patched back through to my own dispatch after they made the notification. And they said, do you want us to call your sergeant? And I said, yes, please. And then I took the next 2 weeks off and never had contact with anybody in my chain of command at all. Nobody called, nobody checked on me, nothing. Wow. There was one person who's a lieutenant colonel with DPS now, who I had never worked for, but was trying to get me on the SWAT team at the time. And he just happened to reach out to me the day after as we were heading up to Show Low, which was where my dad was living. And he called me, like I said, unrelated, and I told him what happened, and he checked on me every single day, and he was the only person that did that. And then I came back to work on my first shift back, and I checked out at we call it the 103, our headquarters in the area. And everybody dispersed as soon as they heard me go 10-8.
Wow.
And I took it very, very hard. I felt like the entire world had kind of turned their back on me. And I realized now looking back, it's because we just suck at talking about it. We don't know what to say. But I felt like, I had given my time, my energy, my love to this agency and everybody that worked in it. And nobody was giving any back when I needed it the most.
So listen to what she's saying. I mean, how many of you have experienced this, and it doesn't have to be in her specific instant, but have experienced some type of traumatic event, right? And looking to who you consider to be your brothers and to be your sisters for support. And instead of receiving support, what you get is the cold shoulder.
Right.
And so it throws you in a tailspin. Because here you are thinking that the people that you, quote unquote, bleed with, right? The people that you're willing to lay down your life for, something happens in your personal life and they run. And you feel alone.
Yep.
And you feel abandoned. And so how does this shift you at work?
I was angry. I was bitter. I became very recluse, went and did my own thing. The same thing happened at home. I turned my back on my husband. He was trying to help me understand why people were doing what they were doing. And I wasn't hearing it. I wasn't interested in hearing it. It hurt too much to hear it. So everything in my life it's all about me going forward.
So this is an interesting thing for you guys to hear, is as police officers, we are taught to do one thing, and that's just get the damn job done. Don't think, don't feel, just get the job done. And so this is what we ingrain in ourselves to get the job done. And then something traumatic happens, and guess what? Now all these pent-up feelings and emotions want to come out, and you're like, well, shit, I don't know what to do with them because I've never had to deal with them. And so the easiest thing to do is to what?
Deal with it yourself. Can't trust anybody.
Yourself.
Put up the walls.
Put up the walls,
Yeah.
Close off. And by closing off, not only now are we hurting ourselves, but we're now hurting our family as well.
Right.
So here you are suffering inside, literally not knowing how to process what's going on. And your husband, who's trying to reach out, can't because you're just doing what you've been taught to do, which is close it off and just go get the job done.
And I did. I up and left. I left.
So how long was it before you're able to finally maybe process or start to understand what's going on inside?
As soon as I became a supervisor. So part of the path that I went down in taking care of me and putting myself first was I decided, because he and I had talked multiple times about promoting to sergeant, and we agreed that as long as we were together, there would be one of us that would take that path and the other one would not. And we would, so we agreed that he would do it. And so out of spite, as soon as we split, I'm like, here we go. Yeah. So I took the sergeant's process, and actually turned out to be the single greatest thing that ever happened to me, because it turned my focus from myself to other people.
To your squad.
Yeah.
So you're leaving this environment where you didn't know or understand how to connect anymore, and you run.
Yep.
And out of spite, it leads you to exactly where it is that you need to be.
Right.
Which is in this position that now it's not about you anymore.
Right.
It's about those that you're supervising. And for those of you who hadn't had the experience to supervise, and especially as a sergeant, I think sergeant is the single greatest position on a police department.
Could not agree more.
Single greatest.
Yeah.
I remember when this is so funny. I'll tell you guys at some point like how we met, which is we've had these series of events that have happened. But when I was going through the worst part of my life was also when I promoted.
Interesting. So actually for me, it's happened twice. Both of my promotional processes. Yeah.
So here you are in this position now that out of spite you promote, but the truth is that it is actually a gift for you.
It was huge.
So as you're helping out your squad mates and seeing all the issues that they're going through and the things, and you're realizing I don't want them to be like me,
Yep.
i.e. alone and abandoned. Like, What's changing for you?
And I have tools in my toolbox to help them deal with their stuff because I've been through some of my own at this point, right? So I think what was happening with me is finally that, the piece of me that I ignored for years, which is what every woman instinctually has, is a caring, nurturing side to them. I had the protective, justice side. Being a cop was well developed, but the part that I pushed aside was everything soft because that could harm me, right?
Exactly.
So going into that role as a supervisor allowed me to start learning how to be a woman, how to truly be a woman. You can still do this job and do it very well, and you can still kick ass and be a badass. In fact, I think it makes you more badass when you're very well-rounded and you have compassion and empathy.
I love this. And all you guys right now are like, but I'm not a woman. Listen, don't listen to the fact that said she learned how to be a woman. What she learned was literally how to become in touch with her feelings and emotions and how to deal with them.
Right.
And guess who has more issues than women when it comes to dealing with feelings and emotions? It's you jackasses. I know this. I was that guy. So the truth is that this position then allowed her to confront what she'd been avoiding for so long.
Yeah.
So this starts to shift you, right? And how? Let me back up a little bit. When you first got divorced, what was your relationship like with him?
At first, it was difficult. Obviously, we both had hurt feelings. We didn't talk about stuff. It didn't take very long, and it really just became, it really came from my background. My parents divorced when I was very young and had a very tumultuous relationship.
Right.
And when he and I got married, my dad made a big stink about sitting near my mom at the wedding, and we're talking 20 years later.
Wow.
And I remember telling Zach that day, I will never do this to my kids because it upset me so much. And so I ended up writing him this long letter. I called it the Raising of the White Flag letter, where I kind of came clean about everything and fell on the sword for everything, took responsibility for everything.
Wow. Guys, listen to this. Listen to this. This is called telling the truth.
Yeah. It was probably one of the hardest things I ever did. I held on to that letter for a while before I actually sent it. And when I sent it, it set me free. Yeah.
Hold on. Say that again.
When I sent it, it set me free.
It set you free. When I was going through my struggles, it was the same thing. It wasn't a letter, but it was in person. Like, I knew I needed to tell my wife all of these things that I'd done. Like, I had to. There was no way I was going to move on without it. And so just like you, there's this feeling of liberation that comes simply from telling the truth. Now, I want you guys to understand how difficult this is, especially for her and her situation. Right? We as police officers, what do? We manipulate other people. Like, there's no way around it. We manipulate them.
Yeah.
And if you've ever worked in an undercover capacity, we straight up lie. Like, there is no manipulation. It is lying. And so we become masters at masking the truth, masters at lying. And that becomes our life. And so to be able to do that, you experience exactly what every police officer wants to experience. And it's that liberation, that freedom. So after those moments of time where you were starting to head down the path of your parents, and you're like, okay, this is not what I want.
Mm-hmm.
You confronted it. Truth set you free. How did that change your relationship?
Oh, it's night and day. He is without a doubt one of my best friends. I've gone through some other challenges in my life, of course, as we all do, as life goes, and he's always been one of the people I could go to for anything, anytime. Always has my back. He's a wonderful father, just a really great man. He remarried, and I adore his wife, and so we do holidays together, and we're a family.
That is beautiful. So
yeah.
Listen to this. Like, yes, stuff happens in life, but it's exactly how you respond to that, right? And so this ability to tell the truth opened up the possibility to have a relationship that really never existed before.
Right. Absolutely.
And now it becomes bigger because you're able to now absorb his family into it as well.
Right.
So let's go back a little bigger scale. So you promote, you spend time as a supervisor in Southern Arizona, I'm guessing?
Yep.
Okay. And so what happens down the road?
I was single for a while, and then met another man that I fell in love with hard and fast.
Was he a police officer?
No, not a police officer.
All right. So she went outside.
I did. And he was energetic and fun and very different than me. Very easygoing, very spur of the moment, by the seat of your pants type. And I loved that about him. It was a huge attraction. And so we hit it off and had a great love affair and ended up getting married.
Okay.
Yep.
So you got married. He is now not a cop. And
Nope.
you're like, I am not going to make the same mistakes I made last
Exactly. Yeah, I was all in.
You're like, I got this. I got this and figured it out.
Yeah.
So you're continuing your career. Have you promoted from sergeant? Are you still sergeant?
I'm still a sergeant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you start continuing down this path.
Yep.
And what ends up happening?
We had what I thought was a really great relationship. Basically, I kind of got hit upside the head with a 2x4 with this one. So he ended up going, unfortunately, down a very bad path that I wasn't aware of at the time, and got involved in drugs, alcohol, partying. We owned a CrossFit gym too at the time. So we had sort of fostered this environment of regular group parties with the gym, and things started going, unfortunately, down the wrong path. And I was, again, working a lot. So I went from gangs to a narcotics task force to auto theft task force. And every one of those, if you're familiar, I mean, you're working a lot of hours, you're dealing with a lot of call outs. Plus I was running a gym full time on the side. So again, it was just, it's like I don't have this ability to understand what stress is, what doing too much is. I'm just one of those people that operates at 120 miles an hour all the time and doesn't even recognize it as abnormal. But I closed my eyes long enough to not see what was happening right in front of me.
Right. Because you had said, I'm come clean. This is my life now.
Yep.
So you're like, cool. He understands me, and I'm going to go full go again, right?
Right.
Gas pedal down, and here we go.
Yeah.
And so you're in your professional life, you're flourishing, right?
Right.
You're having success. Things are working. But at the same time, you were starting to do the same thing that you did before, which
Yes.
is ignore your personal life.
Yes.
Until, like you said, it just hit you over the side of the head with a 2x4. And you're like, this is not the same man that I married.
Right.
So what ends up happening? Let me ask you, did
Sure.
you have any children?
No children together.
No children.
No.
Okay. All right.
What ended up happening was I moved out, and I had several really good friends, my ex-husband being one of them, the girl's dad, who knocked some sense into me, and I left. I got out, and then I promoted to Captain Woods EPS, and I moved to Phoenix and got out of a bad situation. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, and I don't like to use the word luckily because I don't believe in luck, but here's the truth. Like, she had people that cared about her, and she listened to them. Like, there's two parts to this. So each of you who are struggling right now, or even if you are unwilling to admit that you're struggling, there's people out there that care about you. The question is whether you're going to listen to them or not. Like, that's the truth.
And I didn't for a while. It took the right people pulling me aside. There were a lot of warning signs all over. Other people obviously saw it. When you're involved in it, you tend to not see it. And because of what I already had gone through with my first husband, I was absolutely willing to do whatever it took to make it work. And so I thought I was the person that could fix it and save it, because that's what we do. We're fighters, right? And so I actually went the complete other direction with the second one, and it went too far. It went way too far. I allowed way too much to happen. And finally had the right people. Actually, it was guys that I worked with at the time that pulled me aside and went, "What the hell are you doing?" Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So you're able to get out of this situation, and you end up promoting and moving to Phoenix. So what's now going on in your personal life? What are you trying to figure out?
So I moved up here. I was single for quite some time. Didn't date for the first year I was here. I really wanted to put the energy into my daughters, into really being a full-time mom for the first time in my life. But I also had a job.
How old were they at the time?
When we moved here, they were 13 and 15.
So she wanted to dedicate herself to be a full-time mother.
That's right.
Son,
For my teenage daughters.
For the first time for her teenage daughters. Which
Yeah.
again, like most of us will look at this and be like, I can't believe that she waited 13 and 15 years to be a full-time mother. Listen, you make mistakes just like I do and just like everybody else, right? This isn't the judgment show. This is just to allow you to see somebody else's experiences and how they relate to you. The truth is that she decided to be a full-time mother. That's what's important. So you decide to be this full-time mother, and how does that change your relationship? Because I found this interesting. You call them thing one and thing two.
I do, yeah.
Which I think is humorous.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's changed. Everything has changed. I guess my biggest regret that I have is during the last couple years we were in Tucson, my desire to fight and save something that wasn't salvageable hurt them probably more than anybody. So I felt like I had some making up to do for them. They deserved to have mom and not share mom with anybody else. So moving up here was good. It was a tough decision. I let them be the final decision makers, whether we would do it or not. And they were all in. And, it was kind of the Three Musketeers. We bonded. I learned about my daughters. I post all the time how they've raised me. They absolutely have. And I'm still learning from them every day.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So listen, for those of you who think that you can't be successful parents and successful cops, you're lying to yourself.
Agreed.
Like the truth is you become a more successful cop as you're a more successful parent.
Absolutely. And it was one of those things, I don't know if your experience was the same, but there's different types of cops, right? And when you're that hard charger that doesn't see the rest of what's going on in your life, you look down at the people that leave when they're supposed to. Yeah.
Right.
You look down at the people that don't raise their hand to work every holiday. And obviously looking back now 20 years later, I had more to learn than any of those people did. Those were the ones that had it right.
Right.
So
that's the interesting thing. Like
yeah.
I worked, I think it was 12 years before I built my sick time up to over 1,000 hours, which is a long time. Like I don't have my calculator, so I'm not going to do math. But it's a long time. When you're accruing 9 hours a month, that's a lot of hours, which means I wasn't taking time off for myself and I wasn't taking time off for my family.
Right.
And it's exactly like you said. Like we make fun of the cops who have it figured out.
Right.
That leave on time, that use their vacation time for their families, that use their sick time. Like they actually take care of what matters most, which what makes them really good cops.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you go through this time, you're now bonded with your daughters and your relationship with your ex-husband. I'm only going to talk about the first one because the second one doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So you bonded with him as well. And how has this shifted your outlook on your career?
Oh, enormously. So when I moved up here to Phoenix, I'm obviously captain by rank. I'd been a captain for 3 months when I was asked to come up and take the position of a long-term acting major. So that's what I actually moved up here for. So I got kind of 2 bumps in a matter of just a couple months. So where I was a sergeant 3 months ago, and suddenly now I'm working as a major.
For those that don't understand, what's the equivalent of a rank of a major?
For like Phoenix PD, it's commander.
Commander.
Yeah.
Right? So you're talking about a commander, which in smaller agencies, I don't even think those exist.
Right.
But
yeah.
a commander is right underneath assistant chief.
Right.
Like this is the easiest way to look at it.
Yeah.
So there's very few of them.
Right.
So within 3 months, you're already being asked to basically work at headquarters, correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
And how did that shift you?
Well, so when I took this job, it was, well, this is an office job. It'll be great for your family and blah, blah, blah. And in a lot of ways it was. It allowed me the flexibility to take time off. I had weekends off. I had nights off. But by nature of the position, I was the chief of staff, it's called. It's basically the second in command for a division. So you've got the assistant chief, lieutenant colonel for us, and then a chief of staff. And the chief of staff basically runs the day-to-day operations. Right. So it's a very demanding job, and the phone never stops ringing. But it still did allow me some flexibility. I didn't have to always be in the office. I could be at home. I could make my children's events and all of that. So the idea behind this was sort of that, the DPS wasn't doing a majors process for a couple of years. We didn't have a list. So I got to be hand selected to be in this position, which was an amazing opportunity. But by the time the majors process came around, which was in January of this year, I made a very hard decision that was very surprising at my agency, and I didn't take it.
And why didn't you take it?
Because I decided I'm putting my family first.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, this giving me chills right now. Like, you guys can't see this, but this is like the shift, 20 years on, right?
Yep.
20 years it took her to say, you know what? Like, I finally figured out what matters most.
Yep.
And put the family first. And does life still go on?
It absolutely does. It's
Does
better
the
than ever.
department keep going?
It does.
It totally does.
Yeah, they're not supposed to go on without me, but
What?
they've managed to. Yeah.
They've managed to still make it work.
Yeah.
So you turned it down and you end up going where?
And now I'm at the academy.
The academy. So
And I'm a captain, really, for kind of the first time. So
she's technically a captain, but
Yeah,
she's actually
yeah.
cooler than a captain. So she literally runs now the police academy for the Department of Public Safety.
correct. Yeah.
So your shift and focus on family now allows you to take everything that you've learned over the last 20 years and impart on these officers,
Right.
which for me is one of the best things that can ever happen. Now, you shared something with me. I don't know if you remember this. What do you have each of your recruits write and then carry with them all the time?
So one of my first FTOs when I was brand new had me take a 3x5 card and write down what my why was. Why did I get into law enforcement? What was that thing that you say on day one of the academy when you go around the room and say, why do you want to be a police officer? And I wrote it down, and he had me put it in my vest. And so now I have passed that along now that I'm at the academy, and I have the ability to have that sort of influence over a lot of people. I tell them about my story, and when we talk about what their why is, I challenge them to do the same thing, to go get it laminated, because I've had to replace mine a couple times over the years. But when you have those hard days, when you have days that challenge you to the core, your morality, your decision-making, when you're dealing with the agency politics, the world's politics, family issues, and you forget why you got into this in the first place, which we all do at points in our career, that's there as your little reminder to help get you back to center again.
Wow. So I'm actually going to challenge you guys. I'm going to challenge you guys to do this exact same thing. Because, again, no coincidences. I try and shoot a daily video, a live video every day. And that day, when I'm on the mountain, when her recruits come up the mountain, what do you think the topic of my video is? It's why. It's literally why. And
So bizarre. Yeah.
She shares this story with me, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I challenge each of you. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie cop, if you're 10 years on, 20 plus, if you're an old grizzly veteran, like, it doesn't matter. Why? Why did you start doing this job? And why is it so important for you to keep going? Because it is. It really is. Now, this brings us actually to the point. We are now 48 minutes in, and we haven't actually talked about what we came here to talk about. But what I want you to see, right, is each of us come into police work from a unique angle. Each of us has our own story, but each of us deals with the same things. It doesn't matter if you're male, female. It doesn't matter if you're a captain or if you're a patrol officer. Like, it doesn't matter. We all deal with the same things. So the important thing is find something that helps you process. Find something that helps you deal with this stuff. Listen, I'll tell you right now, if you want to talk, reach out to me. My email address is Gerritt, Gerritt, @warriorguardian.com. Drop me an email. Hit me up on Facebook, on Instagram. Like, I don't care. Like, let's talk. I have some free stuff that I can give you that will help you process. It'll help you deal with this. Because I had to deal with this. Because Marcy had to deal with this. And because every other person that you've heard that's come on the show has also had to deal with it. So quit ignoring it and quit waiting till it's too late. Because that's actually what we're going to talk about next. So, unfortunately for you, we're going to end this episode, which just means for us, I'm going to pause this and then record again for the next week. Because 50 minutes in, I want to make sure that you're fresh for this next topic. So, as always, my brothers and sisters, stay safe, and we will see you on